Hi, everyone. We are welcoming you to our session of Ed Talks. We're very happy to have everyone here, and we're very excited to have our guest today, where we will be discussing about creating learning spaces and how to nurture health and well-being in students. Uh, as always, as every week, we talk about how this space for Ed Talks is a place where we can discuss innovative ideas. We can talk with educational leaders, educational experts who can help us guide and discover new ways to help schools and students have a better learning experience so they can become the leaders that we need. So for that, we're so happy to have Jill with us today. Hi, Jill. Welcome
Hi.
all the way from Cuchara. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, but
hmm
we're joking about how she has all the beautiful landscapes, definitely. And well, she is the education director for VS America. She has an extensive experience working alongside educators and helping them and guiding them through this very amazing, I think, topic about can we create spaces that do exactly what we have just described now when we're talking about the well-being of students. And something that we've discussed over and over is the great need that students have for well-being, especially in these moments, right, Jill? I mean, it's been
hmm
tough time, right? And you as a mother, you know this, correct?
Sending our kids off to school and being unsure of what's going to happen in their physical environment, who's going to be in the environment, um, what their emotions, their thoughts, their feelings, how that all plays a part and takes a toll on their ability to be successful every day and to show up every day. Mhm.
Absolutely. And that's the part that I love, because we need to give ourselves spaces where we can reflect and think about new ways in which we can help students and foster precisely that. No, and I think the work that you do, which is amazing, is connecting that part of the physical space at the same time with the learning experiences and the emotional responses that this type of space connects with the students, definitely. And that's one of the first topics we wanted to discuss, which I found fascinating. No, when we talk about movement, this is a
Mhm.
horror story from my childhood. I grew up in a place where the school had, can you believe it, Jill, 54 students per class. And we were
Whoa.
joking about this because we were remembering the type of space that we had. So when we talk about promoting movement, it was like, no, no, you cannot move. If you move, it's chaos. So it was
Right.
light classrooms. I mean, that was the old school, right? We've changed our perspective. What can you tell us about this?
I think 54 students. The most I ever had as a teacher was 40. And it
Wow.
was, I mean, you didn't move because you were literally like right up against each other. And so, when we redesign spaces and work with architects, really understanding that, students from the age of 0 to the age of 10 should sit for no more than 5 minutes at a time. From ages to 11 to 15, it's 10 minutes at a time. And for 16 and over, and for us adults, we shouldn't sit more than 20 minutes at a time. Our body is
Hmm.
designed to move and to be in action. And they actually call sitting the new smoking. And
Wow.
so, yeah, so really thinking about when we talk about well-being and our physical space and what it promotes and the kind of furniture we choose, the lighting, the air, all of that really nurtures a child's ability to learn. And so if we connect the levels of focus and concentration to the design of our physical environment, we have to make sure that they are in alignment to make sure it's really nurturing that. And so, we talk so much about the acquisition of knowledge and understanding and being able to apply that, but we also have to understand and build in the connection when we talk about ownership, that part of that well-being is allowing students to self-appropriate comfortably, to put their feet up, to be
Mm-hmm.
able to fidget and to move is part of the research around brain nourishment, connecting neurons and crossing the midline of your brain. And so really thinking about the way that you design your environment impacts all of that. Imagine going back to school and having
Mm-hmm.
to sit, Gabby, in a room with 54 people and not
Yeah.
move
No, it's
and have
vivid.
to
I don't
do
have
that,
to.
yeah, 7 or 8 times a day. And in
Yeah,
each
no.
classroom, you have to be on point every time.
Yeah, and that's something that I guess we know it, but we don't necessarily apply it to what that means for a school. And we forget that interacting with something implies movement, but at the same time, we're so used to this idea of sit down, don't move, don't fidget, be still, pay attention. And if you're paying
Mm-hmm.
attention, that means that you have to be sitting like a mummy and just looking towards the front, which is not true.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's absolutely not true. It's the opposite. Many people they have learning styles that imply movement. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think we've grown in this idea, but I don't think we're all the way there. Definitely, right? Do you agree?
I would absolutely agree, especially when I still see schools, school districts, pre-K through 12 sitting in the same plastic blue chair from when they're
Mm-hmm.
in kindergarten until they're graduate high school. And the only thing that changes is the size of the chair. And so
Right.
one thing we have to focus on when we think about, we talk about we're in this fourth generation of experience and we're building fourth generation schools. A learning environment doesn't mean that every child needs a table or a desk and a chair. And how do
Okay.
we start to reimagine the way that rooms are designed and outfitted, or learning commons or small group rooms and seminar spaces, lecture halls? How do we start to reimagine the ways that humans group together?
Mm-hmm.
And flip the notion that we need to have a chair and a table for every student so that they're paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of that is, and the work that I do with teachers and with school leaders and A&D architectural and design teams is really get them to understand the types of pedagogical decisions that
Mm-hmm.
teachers are making that support students in collaborative and cooperative learning. How do we design an environment that's agile enough to be able to quickly shift to those
Mm-hmm.
pedagogical decisions? And so, really retraining not only how to teach in a student-centered and a project-based or problem-based way, but then how to use that environment to really capture what the essence of collaboration is. So students are building on that skill, whether they're laying on the floor, whether they're
Mm-hmm.
sitting on a piece of soft seating, whether they're outside and we're turning the hallways and making all of them active. How do we start to really think about fourth generation schools for fourth generation learners, for kids who really need environments that match the reality of the world today?
No, and you know what keeps going through my mind, and I'm thinking about so many schools that we get to work with, and I think it's a bit what you're saying is it brings on a little controversy, right? Because there's this very firm belief for a long time that for you, in order to have this focus and this attention, forget about having a soft seating place. No, because then your mind wanders and you lose them, and
Mhm.
it's just to aim for that is something that is so hard to do, because in many ways, I mean, education has grown, but in others we're very attached to tradition, right?
Mhm.
And the way the classroom looked like. And what you just said is true. I mean, if I think of the classroom where I was not happily learning with 54 other students, where I couldn't move,
Right.
I was not engaged. I was not
Mm-mm.
motivated. I felt asphyxiated. It was like you would go there and just clock your time out until you left because it wasn't a place that you owned, right?
Mhm.
S- And that's why when you said something about giving choice and comfort, what is the importance of those two elements for students, Jill?
Well, I think if we think about the most comfortable place you've been in, or for
Hmm.
some, your home that you really intentionally put together. Your home has a variety of places where you do a variety of different things. Your wet and messy kitchen area has a different type of seating and fosters a different kind of connection and collaboration than, say, your living room does. And so,
Hmm.
one is if we're really creative and we need to really sit and huddle up and spread out, typically your living room is it affords that with a table in the center, the seating, everybody's facing each other. Whereas in the kitchen, it's this wet and messy, and you're standing and you're in and out and you're moving in a different way. And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
when we think about like the World Economics Forum, and they're saying, as I shift myself in my seat, they say, that one of the top skills is cognitive flexibility. So if we never allow students that kind of flexibility to exercise their cognition in a different way, then we're actually not producing the kind of students that our standards aspire to, and that the vision
Absolutely.
that many of us place on our website and in our school and really articulate your physical spaces have to honor that if I'm going to be deeply thinking and deeply engaged, my body needs to be engaged as well. And that
Hmm.
health and well-being doesn't come from mass production of a
Hmm.
sit and get model anymore.
Hmm.
Therefore,
Hmm.
classrooms are not designed with the only modality being at the front of the classroom, and really
Absolutely.
giving the teacher the skill sets and supporting them with PD to also change their decision making around their practices has to be equally weighted,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
there are a lot of schools that I go into and they're amazing learning communities, the highest level, the highest quality of lighting, natural light, circadian lighting, the finest furniture, and teachers have put it into rows based on their mental model of how they should teach and what
Hmm.
they've been given previously. And so, when we think about empowering safe environments, we have to also give teachers the opportunity to understand how to use learning spaces in an agile way and
Hmm.
work in an agile way. And
Hmm.
if we don't balance the two, we usually just take the script or the mental model of what we have into the space that we're in. And as Winston, I think it was Winston Churchill said, the space defines your behavior and your
Hmm.
behavior is defined by the space. And so
Mm.
how do we really, if we want, if we want critical thinking and
Right.
versus compliance,
Hmm.
we have to think about all of the factors that impact someone's ability to think critically and creatively.
Absolutely. And I think it's a problem of connecting this inner philosophy with this
Mm-hmm.
outside, external, concrete ways in which you can, be really coherent with that. Because we
Mm-hmm.
say we want to create, critical thinkers and have cognitive flexibility, sure, but we still don't see that the path towards that is it has to be different from what we have been doing so far, because that's not necessarily what has been promoted, no?
Mm-hmm. 100%. Yeah.
And
And
yeah, no, go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
No, no, you go.
I love it. And I'm not exactly sure who said this first or where I learned this, but that your learning environment space is a verb and not a noun.
Mm,
And if we don't see it as this, we talk about active learning and cooperative strategies, but do we really employ that within our space? And that depends on ownership and how teachers value student ownership and student choice within that space, which you find is very different at the different grade levels. In middle school, we tend to tighten up because
Right.
developmentally, middle school students are, I was a middle school teacher for many, many years, and they're a little crazy and they're impulsive, and their prefrontal cortex is shut down because developmentally that's not, they're focused mentally, growing in other places and puberty and this and that. But we don't honor them with the freedoms of comfort because we're worried about classroom management
Right.
versus command over the learning process. And when we think about health and well-being, we want to give students the opportunity to be agents of their own creativity, and that's messy
Yes.
and that's
Yes.
tough.
Yeah, yeah, what you said, and you chose the perfect age where people's, I mean, I imagine teachers freaking out because of course when you have middle schoolers, you're like, no, 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 please, you have to have control, no? We have to have this structure that is so well defined that, and it's okay to create structure, of course, kids need it, but and I think this is the key, and this is something I would love for you to elaborate, because when we talk about well-being, we don't necessarily think about the space and how can you promote this even through that. I mean, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it reminds me of so many of the classrooms that we walk into. And when we talk about, everyone talks about students that are learning and agency, and I can't think of all the
Hmm.
buzzwords right off the bat, but we want
Autonomy.
kids to own yeah, we want them to own their own learning. We want them to be autonomous and have agency. Yet when you cross the threshold of a classroom that's been decorated by a teacher, and the
Hmm.
teacher's handprint is
Hmm.
it all over the room,
Yes.
basically, just in my experience, teachers own 90% of the space, and students, in your case 54 of you, would have to divvy up that remaining 10%.
Hmm.
So does that really nurture well-being if you're having to ask permission to function in someone else's space, even if it's just for a 50-minute period? A teacher comes in, if I'm in high school, I may be in a different room every hour. And so, but I still set up that space in a way that creates ownership. I'm
Hmm.
teaching you today. This is your lesson. And so, how we reimagine and reuse space is really important if we want to open up the connection of inclusivity for all students, because that's what nurtures well-being, is that sense of inclusiveness. And inclusivity is to be part of a group, a collaborative group, whether or not you're friends or you have a connection, requires that you nurture the well-being of how to build teams. And that's really hard for some adults because they don't necessarily have those skills themselves.
Yeah, you know what? When you were saying that, I kept remembering my philosophy classes, where we talked about one of the greatest human needs is to belong. And
Mm-hmm.
to promote a sense of belonging, you need to feel connection. And
Mm-hmm.
I think this is something that we don't really think about. Are the subtle messages that contradict what you're saying, because we say we want you to be engaged, we say we want them to participate and get involved, but then we send out this mixed message where I control the environment, I control the setup, and then I wonder why they don't respond to my invitation to engage, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So it's a question of trying to be very consistent in what we say and the space that they have. Is that right?
Yes. And I think even before the consistency and awareness of our personal impact on the environment to help us see that bigger picture of belonging means, yes, I do need to take an extra 15 minutes to prep teams to be able to work together, and then to be able to visually understand how students move in and out of spaces and in and out of groups to be able to make better pedagogical decisions for students to feel like they belong in that space, to then be open to learning. That was a long sentence. It might be a run-on, but I got excited.
No, I love it. And you know what I was thinking is, let's just say, for to set up an example, I'm a teacher, who is in this moment realizing that my space, the space where my students are participating in the learning, is very far away from that. It is the closest thing to this traditional classroom where, as you said, 90% of the space is created by the teacher, has the handprint of the teacher. How do I take this journey? Because I do think it has to be through a journey, right? It's not, I wish we could just snap our fingers and just all of us be there where we want to be, because I know that teachers don't do that because they're not aware of it. It's just, it's something that we don't even stop to think about. It's, so now that we are, how can we just journey towards that? Because it can be scary as well. I mean, if I'm used to this idea of very structured spaces, the idea of introducing flexibility elements can be daunting. So how would you do? I mean, you've been in that situation. You're a teacher. You know what happens in a classroom, which is always very hard. So how can we begin that journey?
I think if you live in a space that's your own classroom, the very first thing that you can do is not decorate. Don't put up borders. Don't label everything. Leave the room empty, and then co-create what this space is and how it will be used with your students. And number one, it's going to save you time to plan because you're not decorating your room every year, right? And your money. And but it also allows students to be part of the process, to say, you know what, we would like the pencils and these resources to be here, and we would like these things to be here. And then for a teacher to really look at the amount of square footage that their desk and their materials take up. And so I walked into a classroom once, and the teacher's proudest moment was to say, I have 400 gnomes in my collection. She had 400 gnomes in her classroom. I was like, oh God, it's scary.
Yeah.
But in the sense of, it's okay to place your personal self into a space, but not all of the space. And how much room are you actually leaving for children to feel as though they have a space in that place? And I think really looking at the balance of that. And sometimes that can be a room is so sparse that your teacher doesn't want to get to know you, versus there is nothing of my student work is not curated in the space. How do you use student work as the teaching and the resource versus all these pre-made poster materials or all of your favorite historians along the wall? Or I've been into a classroom and in high school, and it was full of football posters, and everything was football for this teacher. And it was really intimidating for those students who were not, sports and football was not their go-to or their passion. They felt very intimidated. And so just really, I think the first step is looking at the artifacts that you display in your space have an impact on whether or not children feel safe and feel welcome in your space. And that kind of co-creation nurtures that belonging piece that you brought up. And I think starting with that is really important. And so,
Okay.
and
Okay.
it's not all about you and your space.
Yeah, and that type of letting go of the reins is a bit hard, maybe at the beginning,
Mm,
no? Especially if you've been teaching for many years, to suddenly start rethinking these things is hard. But I think if we if we really understand that what teachers want are students who are engaged. I mean, I
mhm,
am absolutely 100% sure that if we go and do a survey and we ask teachers about this, and you tell them, hey, if I could figure out a way for students to really connect and be engaged in your classroom, and they would say yes. I mean, there wouldn't be one that would say, no, I
mhm.
don't care about that. I'd rather keep my
Right,
gnomes.
right,
So
exactly, exactly.
yeah, so
Absolutely. I think ownership creates that kind of engagement.
yeah, and we can all start with baby steps and see how kids
Mhm,
react, especially when you, as you said, make them part of the process. If you open up a dialogue with them and say, hey, this is our space, no? What
mhm.
do we want to do with it, and how can it best help us to achieve what we want? Then it becomes really interesting, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Because your sense of your identity is part of your well-being. And if your identity is represented nowhere within a place that you spend all day, then how are you nurturing that? How is that healthy?
yes, absolutely. And oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Time is gone.
Oh
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm serious. I
it
just
goes
looked at
so
the time.
fast.
I know, it was like blink and it's gone. I have one last one which we haven't addressed, and I think maybe we could close with this reflection. And we had it here like building the proficiency of educators in learning environments. Can you talk about that, Jill, please?
Absolutely, absolutely. Really looking at, we talk a lot about in architecture and furniture design, the physical features of our classroom, but it's really about being proficient in the ability to host collaborative experiences and being proficient in what it means to be able to help guide people through high quality cooperative learning experiences. And to be proficient in that means that you have a deep understanding of the physical features within your space.
Okay, okay. And I think this is something that we all just need to continue thinking about and having a dialogue about it. I mean, maybe don't go through a drastic change if that's something that is too difficult, but yes, start to just kind of play around with this, because after what we have gone through, and this is something we've said some other times, is it's been a moment where of crisis that either we grow and we learn from it and we dare to do things differently, or we would just miss the opportunity that the crisis brought with it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
well, I wish we could continue the conversation because it's been lovely, but I think we have to stop now. But we for sure, I mean, we were talking about this. We're gonna have our annual event, and I know we'll have other opportunities. We have our leaders forum coming up, and
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna have time and space to talk about these things. So if anyone is interested, just follow us, and we'll be sharing information about it, and just anything that can help us grow as a community. Thank you everyone for joining us, and a
Thank
big
you for
hug to
having me.
you over there, and
Yay.
thank you for being here.
Mhm. Thank you.